Hi everyone! We're going to jump into our next topic for week 1, which focuses on emotion regulation. When we think about emotion regulation, we're focusing on acknowledging the emotion we're feeling and then using breathing techniques and other skills to balance out our emotions so that they don't affect our ability to make decisions. First off, it's important for us to identify what types of information feelings give us and why we feel a certain way in a given situation. For example, I can identify that I often feel frustrated when I can't focus. The emotion I feel is frustration, and the root cause of that frustration is that I can't focus. Right now, I'd like you to take a second and think about an emotion that you often find yourself feeling. After you've identified that emotion, think about what circumstances you often find yourself in when you're feeling that way. After you've done that, take a second and write down on a blank piece of paper or an empty spot in your notebook this same statement that I shared with you. I feel blank when blank. There's so many different emotions that we could include in this and so many different circumstances that surround these emotions. A few other examples could be, I feel excited when my kids have a great day at school, or I feel worried when we have financial problems. Since identifying our emotions is an important component of emotion regulation, it's helpful if we think about the wide range of emotions that we can feel. Oftentimes, we limit ourselves to thinking about only basic emotions, including happy, sad, angry, frustrated, and excited, when in reality, there are many more things we can be feeling, including relieved, confident, undecided, and nervous, just to name a few. This worksheet that I have on the screen right here, you can also find in your yellow workbook on page 1.1.1. This is an excellent reference for you to share with your co-parent or with your kids or someone else in your life when you're trying to help them identify how they're feeling. Sometimes it can be really challenging to put words or put a name to an emotion if we don't have a facial expression to go with it. I find this extremely helpful to show to kids when they're very caught up in their emotions and they're trying really hard to verbalize how they're feeling. Sometimes just showing them a picture of that emotion can help them explain how they're feeling, or they can just point to how they're feeling and you can help them name those emotions. It's important to be able to add more vocabulary words to our emotions dictionary so that we can better understand what we're feeling, why we're feeling that way, and what we can do to help regulate those emotions. Next, we're going to talk about what kind of information feelings give us. They can tell us things like when we're in danger, when we're upset and feeling discounted, when we're being taken advantage of, whether or not our relationship or situation is unhealthy for us, and if something gives us joy. Oftentimes our emotions can be overlooked or feel too overwhelming for us to want to deal with, but in reality they are extremely powerful and extremely helpful in helping us identify what's going on around us. For example, we could never know if we were in danger if we never had the emotion of fear. We could never know if something was fun for us or brought us joy if we never had the feeling of excitement. Feelings are very powerful and are an extremely helpful tool for us to be more in tune with how we're feeling and in what situations we feel certain ways. This chart right here is a good example of how thoughts and feelings can eventually turn into undesirable behaviors. For example, if you're feeling a really strong emotion, such as anger or frustration, those can lead to thinking cues and feeling cues inside your brain. Eventually, those cues and those triggers can turn into an undesirable behavior, which can look like exploding on your kids, yelling, saying unkind words to your co-parent or your husband or your wife. Those are things that are not desirable, that is not a desirable behavior. That's not how we want to act. Those are not things that we want to say. However, if we have not taken the time to practice emotion regulation and balance how we're feeling and be more in tune with what our emotions are, oftentimes thoughts and feelings can very quickly turn into an undesirable behavior. We're going to talk a little bit more about how we can practice emotion regulation so that we will not be letting our thoughts and feelings dictate how we act. We're going to take a quick look at this question and then think about what the answer to that might be. What happens to our ability to think clearly when we're feeling strong emotions? Oftentimes, we have a reduced ability to think clearly because our emotions take over. If we think about our ability to make decisions and our feelings and emotions all in one shared space inside our mind, it can be really hard for the part of our mind that makes decisions to think clearly if most of that space is taken up with really strong emotions, whether those are positive or negative emotions. The more strong feelings we have, the more that part of our decision-making ability shrinks because it's overtaken by emotions. Oftentimes emotions can help us and direct us into a certain type of decision, but they shouldn't be more powerful than our decision-making ability. And sometimes if we don't take time to practice our emotion regulation and kind of come down from some of those emotions, our ability to make decisions can be dramatically affected. And we may make a decision that doesn't match something that we really want to do or something that we really want to feel. One of the reasons that we want to be very aware of the decisions that we're making and the actions that we have is because it greatly affects our effective communication. If we want to be an effective communicator, we have to make sure we're practicing emotion regulation in order to be having conversations with people that are accurately reflecting what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and that we're not speaking solely out of our emotions. If you open up your yellow workbook to handout 1.2.3, you'll see an illustration that looks like a stepladder on this page. This is a process that can help you outline how you may have a conversation with someone in a way that's going to be effective and not driven solely out of your emotions. For example, if we start at the bottom of this stepladder, the first thing you're going to want to do when you're having a conversation with someone, whether it's your child, whether it's your boss at work, maybe it's a caseworker and you're trying to ask to have more parenting time with your kids, or maybe it's a co-parent. In any situation that we're having a conversation with someone, these could be effective steps to help us reach our goals. First, we may want to ask them if it's a good time to talk. You're more likely to get a better response from someone who is in a position to be ready to listen and to be ready to hear. If you catch somebody off guard, or if they had a really busy morning and they're late to work, they may not be in the best position to want to hear what you have to say. Next, invite the listener to tell you how he or she is doing. This really helps build rapport with the person that you're trying to communicate with, especially if you have a request that you're going to bring to that person. Inviting them to share how they're feeling helps build a connection between the two of you. Empathize with the listener's feelings, efforts, and situation. Whatever they share with you, show empathy. If they're talking about how they had a very busy morning, empathize with the emotions they may be feeling from having a busy morning. Next, state your feelings and goals. You can say things like, I feel blank when blank. I would like. This might be the time when you say, I really would like to have more parenting days with my kids. Next thing is to validate. Validate the listener's concerns regarding your request. Oftentimes, if you bring up a request to someone, they're going to have concerns or worries about how your request will affect their lives. If you're asking your boss at work for more time off, they might question you and say, well, I may not have enough people to cover that shift. Validate those feelings and help them know that you understand that what they're saying is valid and that their emotions and their feelings matter. Lastly, seek partnership. State what you're willing to do. Ask if they'll work with you. Ideally, at the end of any conversation, we want to find partnership and find a way for both people involved to feel comfortable with the decision that was made. This can be an excellent tool to use if you know you have to have a conversation with someone, especially if it's one that might be a tough conversation, one that you maybe don't want to have. Following these steps can, in the end, help you reach your goal more efficiently and more successfully. Connecting emotion regulation to effective communication is extremely important. If we enter into a conversation with our feelings of anger or frustration, or maybe a lot of excitement or a lot of worry, we're less likely to have an effective conversation with someone. The last thing that we're going to do in this lesson is practice some emotion regulation. You will find our emotion regulation practice in our next video that will be posted. Emotion regulation, as we've mentioned today, is extremely important for effective communication and for teaching and modeling to our children. So after you finish this video, please take a second to go watch our emotion regulation practice video.